open the December 28th Conservation Commission meeting for Littleton. And I'd like Amy, if you read the regulations again.
Yes. The town of Littleton began conducting remote participation Zoom meetings pursuant to Governor Baker's emergency order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law on March 19th, 2020. Since that time, unanticipated legal concerns relating to the open meeting law have been brought to our attention by town clerk. Those concerns were supported by the Attorney General's office and confirmed by town council. In response to these concerns, the town will implement the following changes, which in no way prohibit any member of the public from participating in discussion and sharing information during a public meeting, and will ensure that all listeners and participants have equal access to this meeting. People that join the meeting are set so their microphones are muted. If you called in by phone, please use *6 to mute or unmute your phone so that the meeting can occur in an orderly fashion. We ask that people who join keep their microphones on mute so background noises do not interfere with the meeting. If you wish to participate in the meeting, please use the raise your hand function available on Zoom. If you called in by phone, dial *9, which will activate the raise your hand function. The meeting host will notify the chairperson of the raised hands, and the chairperson will determine whether and when to allow public comment. When called upon, participants should unmute, then state their name and address. After speaking, we request the participant return their microphone back to mute. There you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
To approve, I assume we got 2 sets of minutes to approve.
No, the executive session minutes will not be approved until you're ready to release what is inside the executive minutes, which I assume
All right, so we just have
probably
the
okay.
regular minutes.
Right.
Got any omissions or corrections?
I just had a few on page 3, just a grammatical through Cooper Farm Lot 12, halfway down, and I'll send this to Amy. Lot 12 was probably ready for certificate of compliance, and it says hat instead of that. So that's one. And then on page 4, for notice of intent 80 Air Road, almost all the way down, moving forward, they will be, it says ROBING, and it should be probing the basins. Those are 2 edits that I would like to submit. Anybody else have any?
And I got Kyle's.
Okay.
A couple of those same ones there, and then a couple other minor grammatical.
Awesome. I move that we accept the minutes as amended.
Do I hear a second?
Who did the second?
Kyle.
Okay.
So I guess we need a vote.
Yep.
To.
Brian's going to do the roll call.
Yep. So Carl Melberg is not present. Sarah Seward.
Yes, Sarah Seward.
Kyle Maxfield.
Maxfield, yes.
Brian Crowley, aye. Andrew Samarco.
Aye.
Jim Pickard.
Jim Pickett, aye.
And Julie Rupp.
Julie Rupp, aye.
Motion is carried.
Did you do yourself, Brian?
Yeah, you did.
Yep, I did.
Thanks.
Okay. Under administrative discussion, 50-foot no disturb area waiver review. Is there? You want to tackle that now or later on in the evening? Or?
You've got a few minutes to do it now if you want. Yeah.
Amy, you got some input on that? Or?
Yeah, and that was really because I hadn't updated in a little bit. Just to let you know that I'm keeping track of that, and I know mostly for my benefit, so I can go back and cut and paste language into similar projects. Let me see if I
One question with that, Amy, on that top first page, it says the revision date was March of 17. As you make edits, can we maybe just at the last page of the document do that?
Yeah.
Versus the first. I like the format though. That's very helpful.
Yeah, you can tell is at the beginning I wasn't really doing findings per se,
Sure.
but once we got into it, I realized we probably should really have some backup
Right.
about that and try to be as consistent as I can be.
And these are only the ones that are awarded, correct?
The ones you're negative out there that didn't require those.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I skipped ones where there was no waiver involved. And I think I try to keep track of ones where they started with a waiver, but then backed out. There were several of those where they were able to get out of the 50-foot.
I think would be helpful from a data standpoint that, and it doesn't have to be in this document, but to be able to have a kind of like a sidebar document of the ones that applied that were not granted.
Thought there was one or two in there that weren't granted.
Okay.
Yeah, there weren't.
Yeah, I guess I thought there may have been more. Okay. So, okay.
I think the only, if I remember right, the only denial has been basically for the vernal pool impact over at 10 Fort Pond.
Okay.
He's putting the driveway in. Other people may have withdrawn or come in for an informal discussion.
Right. And I don't think we need them.
Yeah, I wasn't to put those in, but so the information is all there if anybody ever wants it for any reason.
Excellent.
And you can put your fingers on it pretty quick too, I believe.
It's usually pinned up behind my desk. And when I had to go find it on my computer, I was like, where the heck did I file that?
Conservation updates. New England Forestry Foundation Proudy tree planting, Brown CR.
Yeah, frankly, when I realized that we had 15 minutes to kill, I started thinking actually to kill. So Rick did put in for the grant for the Neff Proudy for the not China berry, the porcelain berry control. And I think you guys might have seen that picture of what it can look like in Westford. So it's good to tackle it. And I think if Neff does get the grant, we'll have to talk about the permitting and the phasing and, you know, how they want to start off. But they would have to spend the money for this grant by June or something. So the initial thing is almost as much to be able to start clearing the porcelain berry and some of the other invasives to get access to the rest of it and assess it as anything else.
Where does it come from? I've never heard of it before, but I guess I am too naive.
I think I don't know what part of the world it comes from. I think it's been coming up from the south.
Is there...
Rick is on mute, but he knows.
Do the commissioners feel there's an interest for us to like put this on our website or do FAQs of things to look out for that are invasive? It's kind of like that mile a minute vine that I think the average person would probably like to know. It's like, hey, if you ever see this, you know, take a picture and send it to us. So it grows.
I kind of agree with you, Sarah, that at least ought to be posted. So, as you say, posted so that people recognize it and can tell somebody, even if they see it on some of our property that we don't know about.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely. I'm not necessarily convinced that the conservation page is the place to do it because I'm not sure how many people visit that. There is information on the LCT.
Sure.
One, and we can certainly, you know, point at each other to go find more information. Rick's been trying to get an invasive plant management group together for a while, and it's just really hard.
And I don't know who reads what in town anymore, but that's is always a nice story when they're looking for something like a filler story.
Yeah.
So
Would that be something that should go into our briefly in our report that we has to be done for the
annual report?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
I think any information that can be provided like at the trailheads is extremely helpful too.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking that if we get to go ahead with a porcelain berry, because it's going to be right there, and a lot of people walk up Proudy, is we could have some information.
What spread
in general and invasives in
what spreads it? Birds?
Birds.
Well, I guess I would also be concerned not only just birds, but so many people make arrangements with different greens in different seasons, or if they track it, the transmission through shoes or other ways. So to have some signage like "Don't pick," treat it like it's poison ivy too.
Is it poisonous?
I don't think so.
No, but the berries are really neat. Like the berries on one plant can be different colors of berries on one plant. So it's really neat looking.
So here again, people might pick it for their vases.
Yeah, no, exactly. Sort of like how bittersweet got just so out of control. It's,
Exactly.
decorative.
Yeah.
I think to the extent we can, providing knowledge about invasive plants, like I like Brian's idea about the trailheads, because, you're out there and you just saw a sign about it, people might figure out what it is. And then, this is a little bit off topic, but to dovetail a little bit, just identification in general of, some of the common plant species, like the trees. I walk with plenty of people on conservation land who can't identify an oak. And so just from a general knowledge standpoint, it just seems like it would be useful as well. And invasive plants are, as we're seeing, they impact property value. They cause a lot of work and a lot of money to be needed to bring a property, back to a good condition in some cases. And, it's going to be an ongoing and larger problem.
I think somewhere back there was I don't know whether it was conservation or Littleton Trust, they put out some sort of a magazine or a brochure on some of the different trees and how you identified them or something. It seemed this would have been probably 20 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
Something put out, I think.
Yeah, there have been little guidebooks for the various properties, which are totally out of print at this point. Some towns, I know, Acton and Lincoln, I have them. They have those laminated folding brochures you can open up, and it goes through more common birds and trees and stuff like that, which are great things.
I was thinking just plaques near trees, like small plaques near or on probably is not a great idea, but
I've seen a lot of people, Julie, use the gardening stakes that they can write on and just put them in the soil.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah,
Prouty has those things with a little bio of the trees, which is good.
Speaking of trees, Amy, you mentioned something about tree planting as a discussion.
Yeah. So the tree planting, I don't know, BMPs is in its sort of final draft. Matt and Rick are both on the committee, so we're going to have another meeting with the consultant VHB probably in January sometime and try to finish that up.
Matt, are you happy with that progress?
Yeah, it's going great. It really is. Like I said, we've worked on similar documents and the stuff that they're putting out, after all of our comments and everything. It looks good. So I think it's gonna be really nice.
Awesome. Thanks for help with that.
Is that where we'd use some of the money that
You
was
were on.
promised from us from that last development out on Taylor Street?
No, that was a community compact grant from the governor's office is how they arrange it.
It's amazing. There's always grants out there right now.
Yeah, so there was a grant to cover that, and the second half of that grant, from our point of view, covered some of the trees on the common, the planting.
But Jim brings up a good point in terms of the Taylor Street plantings as well. Is someone keeping track of that as well? Or is that just money that's going into a till?
Well, they planted what they're supposed to plant on the site for the mitigation, the restoration, and in the basins. That's been planted up at 153. I can never keep the numbers straight.
Yeah, but they
Right, but the money that they
like
donated-
$20,000 or $40,000.
They have reached out to the town administrator. They have not donated yet.
Okay, that's fine.
I believe the money is going to be coming from Amazon, and I think Amazon is waiting to see if they have a project.
Right.
Okay. And what about the Brown property CR that's listed here?
I'm not sure. So the phase 1 came in and the site is good to go. Ditto with the asbestos. We're actually hoping to close this week. So I got to double, because I'm not entirely sure. There's something else going on later in the spring, but I think that as of the first of the year, we will own the property. So I'm having a hard time getting some traction, getting the sub-consultants lined up for things like the demo and the Phragmites control and the survey. But I think maybe now I can get town administrator attention, because of course none of the because sub-consultants insurance levels exactly match what the town likes to see. So
Now, this is going to be held by the Conservation Commission or the town of Littleton, or what, do you know?
Conservation Commission. It has to be because of the CPA money.
Good.
Except for potentially that 1 or 2 acres or whatever it is that might be affordable housing.
Mhm.
If it perks.
Jim, it's 7:45. Do you want to do the new one, the first one?
Yeah. Public hearing notice of intent, Spectrum well, raw water transmission main, Mass DEP file number 204-9XX. Water main from Spectacle Pond well to Wickham Ave, water treatment plant 3.5 miles. That seems kind of on the short side to me, as far as mileage. Somebody want to speak to that?
Yes, so my name is Rick Handevan. I'm a wetland scientist with Ty and Bond in our Worcester office. So yes, this project is a water transmission main from the Spectacle Pond well to the new Whitcomb Ave water treatment plant. I could share a screen to go through some plans if that's useful. So,
Yes.
all right, let me work on that.
And I'll let y'all know, one of the reasons Corey couldn't be here tonight is they had their 3rd child.
Oh, congratulations.
Cool.
So hopefully you can see, I have a PDF open from the NOI submittal, which is, I figured I would start with an overview so that you're aware of the length and path of the project. So this in the north end is the Spectacle Pond and the Spectacle Pond well. That water is going to be pumped from the well and transmitted in this blue line, which is the proposed water main to Whitcomb Ave, where the new water treatment plant will be built. So then this is untreated groundwater. So in the water utility business, they are going to call that raw water before it's finished water. And this transmission main will allow for the new treatment plant to be able to handle the capacity for both the new wells at near the Whitcomb Ave treatment plant and also Spectacle Pond. The project itself is almost entirely in roadway. So most of the work meets Wetlands Protection Act exemptions for utility installation under an existing paved road or driveway. So there is places where the project is in either buffer zone or riverfront where it meets exemptions for both of those. We did file a notice of intent because the project is also in bordering land subject to flooding. So there's no exemption for floodplain. However, the work will, saw cut pavement, excavate, install water main, refill, repave to existing grade is really basically the approach for the entire project. And that will not change the flood storage capacity. For a very long project, it's very limited into what the final alteration of the existing land cover is in the area. It's almost entirely all paved road that's going to be paved road again when we're done with the project. Notably, there are a few the most notable areas would be stream crossings. So there's a couple just south of Spectacle Pond. There's an unnamed perennial stream in this area where my hand is, if you can hopefully see that. And then there's a second stream crossing this is a closer look at that. The stream crossing here, where there's riverfront addition to buffer zone in that location, and then in the south end of the project, where King Street, where the road with the pipe will be in King Street crossing. So the river crossing, in both cases, the work is going to be over existing culverts without altering the culverts. So there's enough cover where the pipe can be installed and insulated without having to physically alter the culverts or deal with water handling, any kind of work in water. So the roadway crossings in both cases are proposed to go over the existing culverts.
You realize they've had a lot of trouble with the gas main along there, keeping that fixed in that area?
At King Street?
Yep. It's been a challenge over the years, I believe. And the other one's gonna be getting underneath the railroad track somehow.
Yeah, so the railroad tracks isn't a conservation issue, but it is an engineering issue. Like I said, I'm a wetland scientist and not an engineer, but let me get to that sheet for you. There's an existing pipe underneath. There's a pipe under the tracks here. So this is to orient yourself and myself. The coming off of King Street, so there's the King Street culvert. C108. Oh, sorry. Well, anyways, I'm messing up the match line, so I apologize for that. But there is an existing pipe underneath the railroad tracks that's going to be used to, the new water main will be lined through that existing pipe. So you can see in the aerial, it's close to the corner with King Street where the survey is showing those existing box cars. And so there's going to be no excavation of the tracks. I'm slowly trying to get the trains, working with getting a closure for the railroad tracks would be very difficult. So they're very fortunate they don't have to deal with that. And then like I mentioned, there's portions of the project that are in bordering line subject to flooding. As I said, that's all being restored to existing grade. There's, on 2A here heading, the water flow will be heading south in this section. There's a pretty significant wetland, as you're aware, in this area, in areas where the project excavation is going to be, in buffer zone or adjacent to wetlands. Even though that's exempt, there's still erosion controls proposed for the limit of pavement to make sure that any of the excavation, the temporary side cast out of the trench is controlled and isn't allowed to migrate into wetlands.
Would it be better to be on the other side of the road?
So this is, they are, I guess, actually, so the erosion controls are on the water side, the wetland side of the road, but the part of what they were having to avoid is the existing water mains, but the proposed water main is actually not this W line type, but it's the RW for raw water. So they are on, in that case, I think it's the east side of the road, further away from the wetland here. But the layout in the road is really kind of dictated by the other utilities, as much as also trying to avoid the road shoulder closest to a wetland. So,
Rick, has there been any discussion of we've had challenges with one of the culverts between kind of like 80 and 90 Air Road. any discussion of upgrades or anything along the way?
We discussed that earlier in the, I guess it was further up towards Spectacle Pond, and I was actually also did a field reconnaissance of that. The goal for this project is really to focus on the water utilities and not the highway infrastructure. So because they could install the pipe without also having to replace the culvert, that's the route that was taken. That it does avoid working in water. I know there's potentially a benefit to try to fix all of the stormwater and drainage and everything else along the road as you're going, and I definitely understand or sympathize with that. But
I appreciate that. No harm in asking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there particular areas that you anticipate seasonally having to dewater?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on like the season, the location. Certainly, they're going to need to dewater to treated upland area. So like
And I haven't read through the plan. Is that noted on the plan? Like in terms of how that mechanism would be used?
Yeah, like let's see what we've got. This is a detail of the water main over the culvert, but let me see if we also have the sheet of E&S details. That's the traffic. I know the narrative discusses that dewatering is, there's no discharge of untreated dewatering wastewater to wetlands. Obviously, you want to have dewatering be treated and discharged to a stable upland area. So that is in the narrative. The detail doesn't specifically include, whether it's one of those geotextile dirt bag dewatering things or a ring of staked hay bales to put your outlet of your dewatering trench into, or the outlet of your dewatering pipe.
I would encourage you to at least put one or two, and then that can be a field decision, but we would like something on the plan with a detail.
Yeah.
Is any of this going to be like they did on 119? They did borings underneath the driveways and stuff, so they didn't have to dig them up, I think. And they put that temporary pipe over from Spec to Beaver Brook Well.
If you mean like HDD for horizontal directional drilling,
It's whatever they did going under drives. In some cases, they did.
As far as I know, this is all trench and open cut versus any kind of I guess there's like, either you can push a pipe, like pipe jacking, or more elaborate is this HDD method where you can turn your drill head and install a pipe that's frequently used to put a pipe under an existing culvert or stream. I'm not aware that's proposed for any of this.
Okay.
Any of the commissioners have any questions? There's no DEP number on this yet, correct?
No.
Yeah.
Anyone feel there's any areas that are sensitive that they might want to see or review more clearly? I feel like we all know the areas in question fairly well.
Yeah, I could use a little clarification. So it looked like where the pipe is coming out from Spec Pond to 2A, it's going to like the south side of 2A. And then there's another sheet where it showed it on the north side. Is it crossing? Like, it looked to me like it was heading out to 2A, heading towards, is that Harwood, Taylor, that area on the north side, but then one of the last sheets we looked at with Middlesex Materials, it looked like it was on the south side. So I'm just curious, like what, that I was glad to see it on the non-wetland side of the road because we've had sloughing and issues with DOT recently.
Right. I mean, so if you want to follow along, like here's, and maybe you can
And
help
I am
me.
overdue for glasses, so
No, yeah, and I apologize. So I've
not
brought us
helping.
up, I've got us to the north end of the project site, and maybe I've gone too far. If you wanted to look at something in the middle, it's not really oriented through the internal site drives of the facility up at Spectacle Pond, but then as it's moving south, the roads in this section are a little more narrow, and you have the issue, I'm trying to get to, I think it's maybe this next sheet where like this is the other crossing in the plan view on the plans instead of the GIS map. So the raw water is avoiding an existing water main here. It's more to the middle of the road because there's wetlands on both sides, and that's something that, then you're kind of stuck with both trying to avoid the other utilities. In this case, there's both drains and water line, and they're, splitting the difference and staying in the middle of the road. So they think the design decision of where in the road the line is going is, avoiding existing stormwater drains, existing water line, as well as trying to avoid wetlands, keep the geometry of the pipe feasible to build. So these, that bends it's better if they're not very sharp. So like trying to make the radiuses work. So there's all those were factors in the decision of how the layout of the pipe has been designed. I'm not sure if this is still the area we're looking to see, or if you want to help me get to the spot you wanted to go to.
Yeah, I think more just curious about 2A crossings and where you are on 2A relative to the large wetland there and like Middlesex Materials.
Did I miss that?
And actually the explanation you just provided was helpful because it looks like a road crossing is just kind of a diagonal across a road rather than, like a 90-degree type of thing.
Yeah, that's like the hydraulics of water flow in pipes, which again, I'm not an expert on, but the more shallow the angle, the better for the flow in the pipe.
Yep, that makes sense.
Hi, Rick. Just joining you.
Hey, Lou.
Sorry.
That's all right. So, Lou, this is Lou Sirocco, who's an engineer with Time Bond. And Lou, I was just pretending to know about fluid dynamics and pipes and why you'd use more shallow angles, but
Sure.
maybe.
Yeah. No, you're right. The 90-degree bends, we don't really use those in buried pipeline applications if we can avoid it, because there's a lot of head loss through 90-degree bends. You get a lot of thrust at those joints, so you need to put in larger bearing surfaces to make sure the pipe doesn't shift underground. So for a variety of reasons, we kind of limit the bends to 45 degrees. So when we need to go around something, we'll use a couple of 45-degree bends. There'll actually be less of an energy hydraulic impact using two 45-degree bends than one 90-degree bend. So from that standpoint, we'll avoid that. underground. But yeah, they come in standard 45, 22, 11-degree bends. And then each pipe segment itself has a certain degree of flexibility where it connects to the next piece of pipe. So you'll get a couple of degree bends just by connecting a couple straight pieces of pipe together. So a lot of times you can bend around objects without putting bends in the ground. Just depends on if you plan far enough ahead and how exaggerated the bend needs to be. But we usually show a number of bends in our designs such that the contractor is preparing to, and is prepared to install them if they find conditions are different in the field and more easily maneuverable without bends. We can make that call in the field, but we try to show conservatively the number of fittings they'll need to make the installation occur.
What size pipe is this, by the way?
It's all 12-inch ductile iron pipe.
Your plans show, you mentioned thrust blocks. They're all precast? Is that what your plans are showing?
Yeah, the water department is kind of standardized on precast concrete thrust blocks, so they would like to go with that wherever possible.
Yeah, I had one other question about like hydrant installations. Like, there's a detail for that. Are there hydrants being installed along the line, or only up to like start now?
I didn't catch the whole question there. It sounded like a question about hydrants. Is that right?
Correct.
There are a number of hydrants. They're not being used for a typical hydrant purpose. This is a raw water transmission main. So the hydrants are there just to mainly at high points to help release air. So when the pipeline is initially filled, we're going to need a place to evacuate the air out of the line so we don't create like an airbound situation with an air pocket in there. And then at low points, there's a couple of low points where we just want to be able to, flush out periodically. But for the most part, hydrants really aren't needed, and the pipeline isn't really even under pressure unless well is in operation. But they will be, standard type hydrants where we do have them, and but they'll be painted a different color so that they won't look like the normal. They'll probably be painted black so that they're not confused as a regular hydrant.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure, you might have some people in the public with a comment. I don't recognize everybody out there.
Yeah, I guess we should speak to whoever would like to talk.
Nope, I guess not.
Okay.
Eric, are you impacting any trees? Or it sounds like it was mostly or all currently under current paved surfaces?
How long do you expect to tie up the roads?
I guess, Lou, can you confirm, like, as far as I'm aware, like maybe the only place there could possibly be any tree impact are you like this initial section out of the well at Spectacle? Are you thinking any kind of?
No, there'd be no need to take any trees out around there. There's there might be some low scrub,
Right.
but nothing substantial that would require a large amount of a specific removal. There's room enough where we've shown it to avoid any significant tree clearing activities.
Otherwise, also construction equipment access should be sort of occupying the same space that you'd need to clear for the road itself.
Yeah, I know the water department is scouting out a few different areas for staging purposes along the route. I know obviously this is one of them, their own property here. There'll be some probably an area obviously at the other end. There's their office that's in between along the way that they're going to be used. And I think they were going to speak with the town to see if there was any area in or around the transfer station. So try to give them different points along the way to store materials, for staging purposes.
That
Right.
means there should be a reasonable amount of fill that won't go back in, I would think.
Yeah, I mean there'll be a little bit of obviously the pipeline itself. That material is going to be need to be hauled away. So there's going to be a little bit of excess that maybe they need to do something with on a weekly basis, depending upon how quickly they proceed.
You were also,
I was just thinking excess for parking lots for the conservation.
Oh, sorry, what was that?
Excess for the conservation, if we had any parking lots in mind. I didn't know whether that, as long as it wasn't big bony stuff,
Hmm.
could be a possibility.
Yep, and I'm sure the water department has their own stockpiles of materials that they could leave it there as well as they store it, transfer it around where it needs to be.
Do you, speaking of stockpiling of materials, when you backfill, I guess there's a concern. We were just talking actually about invasive plant species. And so I'm wondering if you're able to ensure or can ask the water department to ensure that we're not moving invasive plant species to wetland areas, especially, knotweed is one, and knotweed will also grow through your infrastructure. So I think you really wouldn't want it in your backfill areas, but it's just something to think about and talk to them about, because
I wouldn't anticipate too much of that. 99% of the excavated material is going to be from beneath paved surfaces. And then they put that stuff right back in the hole.
Back.
Okay. So usually what happens is they'll have a dump truck kind of run along with the excavator, and the material they take out, they'll put right into the back of the dump truck. And then they'll be installing the pipeline, and then they can dump the material from the dump truck at the end where the pipe has already been installed, and kind of continue and work their way down the road.
So there's absolutely knotweed along the roadsides, along Speck Pond, and along some of these areas. So we wouldn't want to spread that material to other areas. That's absolutely a consideration. And I think what we're seeing as we learn more about invasive plant species is that, DPWs and DOTs are major spreaders by virtue of the type of infrastructure work that they do. And so now, that we have more of an awareness of that, I would say this project needs to consider the areas where there's definitely knotweed existing along Speck Pond Road and other areas, and work to not spread it.
Along the road, edge of the roadway.
Yep, exactly. Along the rights of way.
How about a possible condition be that as sort of a pre-app, I can drive it with Rick or whoever, and we just identify those areas so they're aware of them.
Right.
Well, what time of year you're doing this, but.
The goal would be to bid this out January, February timeframe, and have contractors begin work when the weather breaks, probably April, May timeframe.
Amy, that sounds like a great alternative or option to offer them.
Yeah, and that should work. We could either do it now if you wanted to, or wait until the snow melts at the other end of the season, so.
Yep. Yeah, we're flexible. That sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, so Amy, are we continuing this on to the next meeting?
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah. Plus there's things they have to add as well. So, okay. If commissioners don't have any other questions, we've got other hearings we've got to scoot on to.
So that's continued to January 11th. And I think the only thing you want is the details on the dirt bags, the straw bale corrals, or the typical dewatering pit type thing, some options.
Correct.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Yep.
continued public hearing request for amended order of conditions 93 Manawanaki Trail, U4725-0, Mass DEP file number 204-876. Who wants to speak to this one?
Well, I think we can do an update. After the last hearing, Amy and I went outside after the previous and met with the owner and took some photos there. It had been a while since I'd been on property. So I personally was surprised to see how close it was to the water. I'm not sure, Amy, if you have any photos to share from that time, but I certainly welcome other commissioners' feedback on that. I saw the numbers coming through on the 10-year storm. I feel like presently we get 10-year storms in the spring and the summer quite often. So that is certainly a concern of mine. I think the original intent of what I thought was that we were going to really be able to absorb more naturally through not having pavers and everything there.
So this aerial, let me think about this. The top one is where am I? Is existing conditions. Up here you can see the pavement, and then this was before anything was done. You can see the lawn in there. So that's the change of that. And that's just sort of a reference photo.
Can you remind me what the plan was? From what I saw when we walked out there, the plan was a wood deck that wasn't supposed to extend as far as this patio, correct?
Kyle, I have to tell you, your audio is not working wonderfully.
So this is the approved 2019 plan. Here's the lake at the bottom. This is what would have been the rain garden, and the new patio in here.
So how much bigger is it than what the original plan was?
Well, I think it's not. It's that it's different, Jim. So that
It is closer to the water.
closer to the water,
And the
but
rain garden is
yeah.
half the size.
Just trying to find a picture that I had from that day.
So the rain garden, Mr. Souza took these dimensions after Sarah and I walked it. The rain garden as built is about 3 feet wide, with about a foot to the patio, and then the patio up to the house. Then the scale is kind of useless because it says 1 inch is 10, but I don't know what 1 inch is on this.
Definitely a lot different than what we were permitting as far as I can see.
So Amy, are you saying it's
I also noticed that on the opposite side of the property, there's a direct discharge, flexible black pipe that has a direct discharge onto the beach as well. It's on the further side of that deck. So I thought I had sent a picture of that. I was just looking to see that now. And I thought we had addressed that in the filing.
I did not see that
Yep.
in the filing, in the original filing.
Right.
Sarah, do you know what the origin of that pipe is?
Yeah, Well, maybe the applicant can speak to that, but it's drainage.
Well, it's also roof runoff, right? Isn't there a leader from about halfway up?
Yep, you could see the scouring, and that was not after rains.
The flexible pipe is connected to the downspout off the side of the house.
Thank you. So you're getting good force for sure. Other commissioners have questions, thoughts?
So is the edge of the patio, it sounds like it's now 4 feet from the lake instead of the 8 feet that we had talked about when we permitted the plan. Is that accurate? I think I saw you nodding your head.
Yeah, I believe that's accurate.
Okay. Yeah, and so that was my concern when I saw the photos with the edge of the patio and the garden. And then the other concern is that it's, it's pavers, which is very different from the decking that we permitted. And I mean, I guess really my concern is that what is existing currently is nothing at all like what we permitted. And I don't think, adding stormwater engineering as a remedy, I just don't know how we get there from here. I don't think that makes sense for a project that is just so vastly different in an incredibly sensitive area in the first place. I think I said this the last meeting. I don't think we would have entertained a stone patio here. And the only reason the deck was entertained was, because it was at the same level as the other deck. It was just extending an existing deck a small amount. There's drainage through the decking. There was going to be gravel beneath it. There was going to be a lot more infiltration. And I just don't see this project as anywhere close to what we permitted.
What is your recommendation? Take it out?
So could I ask a question? So preventing the stormwater from breaching the lake at all is not sufficient or not reasonable in your view? That that was the intent of the trench and the dry well, was to basically prevent any stormwater from reaching, even reaching the rain garden. And I would be taking out some of the patio in order to put the trench in. So the patio would be a little bit less towards the lake because I'd be taking some of it out.
Right.
So I guess I made a mistake and I'm trying to make it right. And it sounds like I'm failing to do that.
The issue is that the current project, even with the stormwater infrastructure, never would have gotten traction. And if your neighbor comes to try to do this, there's no, it just never would have gotten traction. And again, what we permitted is not at all what's existing.
I understand.
Other commissioners want to speak and share their thoughts for Mr. Souza?
I'm sorry, say it.
No, we're just asking Mr. Souza for other commissioners to comment for you.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm on this one, not unfortunately, but I agree with Julie. I wasn't around when this got permitted, but I can't. You're just still looking at the proposed plan and looking at the rain garden that was proposed. Even if you would put in a patio mistakenly instead of the wood deck, the rain garden itself wasn't even built to what was on your plan. So we're losing, never mind just infiltration, just the habitat and the top pollinators that you would have put in there. I don't think you have even the room to recover from what was on this proposed plan, other than to remove more of that patio. But I mainly agree that I don't see that initially we would have approved a full paver patio, especially covering that much area of lawn that was pre-existing.
I think my hope had been that there would be more infiltration in its original state, that without having the pavers there. I just think that our storms are getting to be so ferocious that the water's just going to bounce right off it, that we wouldn't be able to accommodate it. Even looking at the numbers, and I appreciate you sending the 10-year storms, I don't think that we can accommodate that even on this site.
So what is the solution?
Would it be possible to maybe remove a portion of the patio and increase the size of the rain garden a little bit, along with maybe some additional drainage?
I think you'd have to remove the majority of it, Andrew, to even get back to any type of infiltration, true infiltration. So,
And it's
but
so
I agree with the other commissioners. It wouldn't have been permitted.
I think there's an ongoing issue too with when you inevitably get vegetation growing up through the cracks in the pavers. How do you deal with that? Are you going to be on your hands and knees removing it, or is someone going to spray, vinegar or herbicides or, that type of thing? So that's an issue as well. That's one example of why we wouldn't permit this type of surface this close to the lake. And really, honestly, the only reason that anything was entertained at all was because it was decking, on posts with drainage through.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. Amy, procedurally, thoughts?
Sorry. Yeah, well, this is submitted as an amended order conditions. So if you wanted to proceed, you could proceed that way, or issue an enforcement order requiring whatever amount to be pulled out, all, or go back to the original design. And procedurally, you can go whichever way you want to go.
Commissioners,
somebody's got to speak up.
yeah, commissioners, what are your thoughts? I think I would rather find a balance of starting at the original design, because I know I wouldn't feel comfortable with just peeling some sections back. I think it's better to go back to the original design and work with some of the installations that might be there, if the rain garden can stay or if that needs to go as well.
I agree, but I think the rain garden stays, and if anything, is more substantial than it is now. But that's what was on the original plan.
Okay.
There's a wood deck, half the size of what this patio is, with the rain garden taking up the rest of the other half. But,
It almost seems to get to the point we need to issue an enforcement order. Would that be the issue to
Well, I think
have it taken out and put the what was originally designed?
right, that would allow you a succinct time frame so that it gets done, and be able to work with the landowner versus something that would just stay there for a while.
It seems almost like we're stuck with it until springtime, good weather. What do you disturb it?
I disagree.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm very concerned with some of the the storms that might come, even looking at it now. You know, the storms that we just had the other day.
Yeah.
We still have to deal with
And the snow, the
grading
rain that
from
we
the
got.
gutter.
So do you stabilize it with gravel then? Because nothing's gonna grow at the moment. Like if you pull the pavers out, I agree it needs to be removed and we need to work with what was originally permitted. And if there are changes to what was originally permitted, that's where the discussion needs to start. But I agree with you, Sarah, that what's existing here is a non-starter for an amendment.
I don't know what's underneath the pavers if you're going to get any infiltration in the time period in this interim period.
Yeah, that's my concern is we
I don't want to get washed.
pavers and we wash, instead wash a bunch of material into the lake.
I'm not sure if there can be borings in terms of opening up. So boring. So to be able to pull some of the pavers up, even every other row, do boring so that you're actually going to have infiltration. Because I'm confident it's very compacted.
Yeah, it's probably what, stone dust under it?
Mr. Souza, were you there when they put that in? Did they compact it with by hand or with machines?
I think for a second.
Okay.
I would say they did. Compact it.
Okay.
They rolled it to make it level.
Yeah. So Julie, I think that you could ask them to take them up, but also do it in a fashion that is going to protect it through the inclement weather.
Let me ask a question, I guess. Is it possible to put sections of it where there's, instead of a stone paver, there's a grading with, so that the water would drain into sections of the patio and not be completely impervious?
I think we're looking for maximum infiltration, especially from the water side coming up towards the house, to come back to a natural state that's not compacted, so that you would be able to have infiltration of storm events or even just rain.
Mm-hmm. But if they could do that, I guess my question is there a way to avoid tearing the entire patio out and putting, like every other paver, instead of a paver, it's a drainage site, including the trench in front and the rain garden and the dry well, so that they would, instead of a stone paver, there'd be a grading where the water would flow into, as well as flowing into the trench at the end of the patio.
Right. I think what you're hearing from the commissioners, that they would not have, more than likely, that too would not have been approved because it would have exceeded, that would have been in a waiver.
I mean, we went around and around on this to get it so you could have the wooden deck. That went on for a couple months. What was proposed.
Correct. So we need to move forward on this to give Mr. Souza some guidance. We have a few options that have put out this evening. What would commissioners like to do? Or we need to have someone make a motion.
Sarah, you want to make a motion to have enforcement order issued?
I think that, while Mr. Souza, that sounds extreme, it does give the commission an opportunity to work with you in terms of pulling it out. Our concern is that if we do not put an enforcement order on, that we have very little kind of skin in the game to make sure it gets done properly. but we are very cautious to set precedents here that this would not have been permitted so close to the water. If you were, 100 feet back or closer, past the 50, that would have been a different discussion. But you are so close to the water. So I would move that we would order an enforcement order to have the deck removed, to work with Mr. Susan, go back to the original plan and see if we can leave some of the installed, as we talked of rain gardens, in place.
Do I hear a second on that from somebody?
And just
Okay,
a clarification, we're talking
roll
about
call
the patio, not their existing deck on the house.
Yes. And before you vote, I'd also want some clarification on the timing. I would be a little leery about ripping this out in the winter.
Yeah, I agree with you, Amy. What do we benefit of trying to pull this out while the ground is starting to freeze?
Yeah, no, I think,
Yeah, personally, I'm more in favor of just leaving it alone because it's going to wash. That's my opinion.
yep, okay.
I
So-
agree.
We would leave it till readdress it, to have dialogue, say the beginning of March, just so that we know going forward, we have a plan.
Yep. And I think in the meantime, can we discuss the plans with Mr. Souza?
I think we need to also talk about erosion control, but we need to talk about that downspout from the drain, because that's going directly onto the beach.
Okay.
We need to try and slow that down.
Okay. But in the next couple of months, like he should be getting his plans together.
Correct.
You know, contractor lined up.
Right, because there's going to have to be a new plan with erosion controls and what that's going to look like afterwards.
Right.
So Amy, is that motion clear? So it was, obviously not for the deck, but for the for the porch.
So, Brad, you want to do your roll call vote?
Sure. One sec.
Trying to remember who we all are.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to find the order.
All right.
Uh,
You probably moved.
yeah, I moved it. One sec.
So the plan really is going to be going back to the original plan. And at this point, the staging is probably the most important piece of that.
Correct.
How to get there.
All right, Brian, we're ready.
Yep. Yeah, I'm just bringing it up. Sorry. Okay, so we have roll call to issue the enforcement order. Carl Melberg is absent. Sarah Seward,
Sarah Seward, yes.
Kyle Maxfield,
Maxfield, aye.
Brian Crowley, aye. Andrew Samarco,
Aye.
Jim Pickard,
Jim Pickett, aye.
and Julie Rupp.
Julie Rupp, aye.
Moved.
Okay.
You issue an enforcement order. Okay.
So Amy, maybe you can have a conversation with Mr. Souza this week or next week to kind of just talk about what that would look like for the next couple months.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
8:15, continued public hearing, notice of intent, 80 Air Road, R15-210, Mass DEP file number 204-919, construction of a new silo, restoration of railroad siding, construction of a rail car storage area, and 3 new groundwater monitoring wells. Somebody want to speak to that?
Yes, I would, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kyle Burchard. Met the commission last time with Bruce Ringwall. There's Cal Goldsmith also joining me this evening. And so we, at the last hearing, had discussed this property and the improvements that Middlesex Corporation had made to the site in response to the comments of the commission. pH testing being done, erosion controls placed around the perimeter, and we described all that. And then there's also a need for an updated operations and maintenance plan, description of the snow removal procedures, and also some sediment probes of the existing stormwater basins was requested. All of that in front of a multi-sector general permit that we will be filing, and we'd like to put as a condition for approval. The tenant that's trying to construct the dry cement silos and scale equipment has a schedule to try to be under construction as soon as possible to hit the market for the upcoming season. What I'd like to do, if I may share my screen, is just to kind of walk through what we went through with our process of discovery with respect to establishing an updated operations and maintenance plan.
And Kyle, has that been submitted?
No, it has not been submitted. It did take a bit of time for us to get the survey done. We understand that. We're not looking to close the hearing this evening, but I'll be sending it out as soon as we get offline tonight so that the commission may review it. Just want to preface that with some of the information that we have in that plan and just try to go through any questions that the commission might have initially. It's a fairly extensive document. I'll just jump quickly to some of the summary items. We talk about all the basic components of what helped this stormwater system to function properly and clean the water as it runs off of this industrial property. There's a whole host of different items that we've identified, as well as some practices for best management of the site. We have an estimated cost of the annual maintenance of these BMP facilities and a schedule that will also align with the multi-sector general permit requirements for minimum of quarterly inspections and annual reporting. And of course, there's maintenance as needed at various facilities, which will be based on the inspection schedule. So I'm just going to, I understand that the commission hasn't seen this, and I appreciate the accommodation to just walk through this very quickly. Stop me whenever I can answer any questions. First and foremost, I'll just point out number 12 is the snow storage area. I think that the facility manager had worked with Amy a little bit to identify these areas outside of the buffers, the flood zone, the riverfront, to be able to provide snow storage up along Air Road. That's typically how they've done it, and that's currently how they are continuing to do it. Now we've included that in this O&M just as a mention for one of the items that try to help make this facility run in a clean manner as it pertains to stormwater runoff. So we have a number of different pieces of infrastructure that go into the existing stormwater quality system that's on this project. If we're oriented to where the concrete batch plant is on the property, there are a couple of concrete flumes that have grates on top of them, separated by a well of sorts, a sediment chamber, if you will. This one is somewhat shallow, but then it goes into, overflows into another concrete channel before being piped through another chamber. And there's a host of other chambers right before we get to the existing detention basin that's out there. We've identified the drainage coming in here and have identified what would be ideal maintenance practices to maintain all of these BMPs to help make sure that the water that's running off this site is clean before it converges with the unnamed channel that's adjacent to the property, that's coming out from underneath the the MBTA rail line. You might recall that the applicant went through and lined the entire edge of the pavement with straw wattles. There's an existing curb along that whole line, which somewhat doesn't make it necessary to line the entire thing with straw wattles. And what we prefer to suggest to the commission is that there be straw wattles and or a silt fence that's placed at the edge of the scuppers that are breaks in the curb that then convey the water into the water quality swale that runs along the southern edge, keeping in the red focused where that water is running off so that we maintain appropriate filtration at those points of discharge into that channel. Seems to be more efficient, more practical. But also just note, curbing is the #1 item that's listed in this, as this entire barrier that's along this southwest edge of the property on this side of the property is a major component of maintaining the proper water quality runoff from this site. So making sure that the curbing is in good shape, that where it's scored or broken or cracked, that it's replaced. We also know the new installation of curbing along the Jersey barriers adjacent to the existing detention basin is also part of that maintenance schedule. So we have the curbing that's controlling the water at specific points to get off the pavement. There will be wattles or silt fence there to capture the coarse sediments and debris, making it more convenient to remove before it then goes through the water quality swale and the rock check dams to get to the existing forebay, spillway, and existing detention basin. And so that's one system on that end of the property. In this middle section where arguably there could be more runoff from the concrete batch plant, the aggregate building, and where the proposed scale and silo equipment is going to be placed. Again, there's a scupper to a stone apron where there would be a place for straw wattles and or silt fence to be placed to capture the sediments before it crosses again across another filtration mechanism in this stone apron to then get into the detention basin. Everything else that's coming into the concrete flumes and system of sediment chambers is fairly efficient, but those all have their maintenance schedule and inspection schedule as well to get into this basin. And then, of course, there is the need for maintenance around the basin, cutting away woody debris from or woody vegetation from the embankments to keep it mowed, trimmed down somewhat. And then also for some of the sediment removal. There were some probes done. This happened last week when there was still ice out there. Our surveyors, our intrepid surveyors went out there and punched some holes in the ice. They found, about 6 inches of sediment in the center of the basin. They found a little bit more, and that's in the southern basin. In the central basin, they found a little bit more than a foot of sediment that was in there. And so we would be proposing also to do some sediment removal as part of the maintenance of these basins that's been added into the O&M plan. So with that, I think I'd like to see if there's any questions from the commission looking to move forward to try to help our client get to construction. There's this process for building permits and so on. Like I said, also the multi-sector general permit is something that we are also advancing to get submitted to the EPA.
Okay, Kyle, I have 3 questions and they start in the order to which you shared for snow storage. If you can go on there where it has number 12, where the snow storage is, Can you remind me where the fueling is of the trucks that are there? Isn't that where the 12 is? Aren't there some pumps there for fueling somewhere in that area?
There may be. I don't know that those are active.
Okay. If you could just let us know if those are active or not. And then as we go over closer to your batching area, I guess I still get a little conflicted because we talk about it's fairly efficient, but then we've been on site numerous times and we really do see quite a bit of surface overflow kind of coming down between 5 and 6. And I think we've talked with Bruce about that in the previous engineer. So that's definitely a concern of mine. We saw that on some of our site walks. And then my last question is, what's the time frame of cleaning these basins? If we've got a foot of recovery on one and 6 inches on the other, I would want to have those basins cleared before we would permit advanced growth on this site.
I just want to clarify, if I may, the 5 and 6, are you saying
Just
flow?
just in that general area, Kyle. So I was just trying to make it so when we were there, we could see, we were there during a rainstorm and you could just see the sheet flow across the pavement coming down.
To this point?
Yeah, coming down. And I think Brian, that was the day Brian and Kyle, we were all there with Kevin, that we saw just the water just kind of cascading down over the parking lot.
So there is sheet flow. I'm sorry.
Yep, go ahead.
There is sheet flow that happens in this area that brings it to this point, which is, I think, why there is a break in the Jersey barrier and then a stone apron to allow for a stable transition for that water to get out off the pavement and get into the basin. And that's its function. Looking at it, is fairly flat across here, and I recognize that. I think that may help in slowing that water down as it gets off the pavement, and providing the measure of pre-treatment effectively with the wattles that are going to be placed, or the silt fence that's permanently stationed really at this break. So I agree. There's flow that occurs here. I'm not sure.
So I guess to clarify, are you saying the permanent solution for this will be erosion control?
Well, the permanent solution is in that erosion control is a standard measure to protect the BMPs at the transition of the water off of the pavement. There's a large stone area here in which that takes place, and then that transitions and conveys into the basin. And the third question, what was your third question about
the removal of sediment?
Okay, before you said the substantial development of the property?
Well, meaning if we're adding more batching, potentially adding more trucks, more traffic.
Well, we are, but we're not changing the imperviousness of the site at all.
You're not adding more trucks.
We're not adding more imperviousness to the site at all. This is all paved areas where this is proposed, and in fact, this is much cleaner than it had been in the past.
Okay, I guess we can split hairs here, but I think we recognize we haven't had any work done on the site since 2013 in terms of cleaning up the basins. So I guess we're trying to, or I would like to see when we're going to get those done.
I think Sarah's talking about, I think, intensity of use. So the intensity of use is increasing.
That would be the goal, I think, of the development. And if you need an exact timeline to actually take out sediment from the basins, I think I have to talk with the applicant, but I think that they are on board to do what they need to do to move it forward. I'm not sure that the time frame right now is the right time frame, but I'd have to work with them on that.
Okay, thank you.
Do your BMPs, is there a threshold? I know we went through that list fast of timing and whatnot. So
I'm sorry, I can't understand what you're saying.
how frequently do those basins get monitored for sediment?
The way that we've set it up in the O&M is, I think, on a quarterly basis. Stormwater basins, they'll be inspected quarterly and as needed. So it does need it now, or in the very near future, conditioned perhaps to be done at the in the spring. And
What is that threshold that it would need to be done? I imagine it's not a foot.
Well, I think what we are calling out for is to have it done when there's a foot of sediment that might be collected 3 months.
When you sediment forebay, you've got 3 to 6 inches, right? Keeping
Yeah.
height of grass 3 to 6 inches. But I thought you had 6 inches, Kyle.
We have 6 inches in the sediment basin to, when we're detecting 6 inches of sediment, that would be the trigger to move the sediment out. We also have 3 to 6 inches within the sediment forebay that's going to the south basin. And I believe in the sediment chambers, and also another 6 inches. So trying to keep that level down to roughly 6 inches all along that pathway. So there may be more frequent cleaning that occurs in the sediment chambers that are leading to that, or in the water quality swale and forebay that go to the southern basin. So that's seems like a reasonable amount of monitoring to do in order to keep that at bay.
You said it, but I want to emphasize it. There's no reluctance to clean out these basins, but we are under a timeline to try and get this facility permitted and ready to go at the beginning of the season. And I'm not sure that doing the sediment removal now is the right time to do it. I would think you'd want to do it when there's less flow going through those basins, less chance of any sediment downstream. I mean, I think if the requirement was that it has to be done before this gets permitted, our client would go ahead and do it. I'm just not sure it's the smart way to go, but if we need to, we will.
Cal, can you introduce yourself for the commission?
I'm sorry, yeah, my name's
For the
Cal
other viewers,
Goldsmith.
please.
I'm sorry, my name's Cal Goldsmith. I'm one of the principals of GPR, Bruce's partner from
Thank
way
you.
back when.
So if could, given that it's been a while, a vacuum truck, there are ways to clean them out without entraining as much, if you were to shovel it out. And then it seems to me that, quarterly for inspection for a site like this, when we're in the situation we're in, we don't really have a good idea. I mean, I do agree quarterly on a typical site. It seems perfectly reasonable. On a site like this where, there's a lot of fines, the materials that they're using themselves will silt up the basins, as well as any sand used on the parking lot, truck tracking from the roadways, etc. It seems to me as a start, I would prefer the inspection to be more frequent to start. And then once they get a better handle on it, because there are likely seasonal variations if we get large rainfalls for one season or versus a drought. We had a drought all summer. It seems like it would make sense to me to inspect it more frequently to start. And you can write that in your O&M plan and say, we'll inspect it monthly, and then, evaluate in a year and perhaps step back to bi-monthly or quarterly, quarterly in the summer and bi-monthly in the winter, something like that.
That's easily done, sure.
There are differences. And that actually brings me to one of the other things, which is this site discharges to an impaired waterway. On the section 303D list, there is no TMDL. So you will be on the hook to do analytical sampling and determine whether the discharge from this site is contributing to the impairment of the waterway. And so that would substantiate for your client the need to inspect more frequently to really determine what interval makes sense. And then the other question I had was the snow storage. Is there a monitoring well where that snow storage is going, and would you need to access it?
There's a monitoring well near it. But
Yeah,
there's
I
not
thought there
one-
was. Oh, I see it. Actually, it says MW right there by Edge. Okay, so it's right. So that monitoring well, is that a stick up or a
No,
flush mount?
it's
So
flush.
it'll be flush mount. Okay. If you need to access it while there's snow on it, it's just a something that will need to be considered.
There's a lot of large equipment on the site, and they would be able to move this snow.
Yep.
Okay. And
Yep. Okay.
Kyle, does this O&M plan talk about equipment storage or equipment washing, or is that addressed in another document?
equipment washing, you know, there's a washout area for this that's kind of a separate aspect. There's an area where the trucks are backed up, open, and there's a trough that exists here that is part of that separate operation outside of the buffer areas and so on. But it's an area that has a trough washout in one chamber that has an overflow into a secondary chamber, and then there's a tertiary chamber as well, that all that water wash off of the trucks then gets recycled into the concrete plant, used in the mixture of the new wet concrete.
Right. That would be a non-allowable discharge to stormwater.
It's not going to stormwater.
Right. Do you have any, are there any other discharges, like equipment washing, or anything like that, that would go to stormwater?
No.
No, I don't believe so.
I would definitely take a good look and make sure you have a thorough understanding of their operation, because a lot of times, folks aren't really aware that they have a non-allowable discharge to stormwater.
There was some discussion with the operations by the plant manager that he told us that he had made sure that everybody understands that that's the only place they can do washout, because they had been, he's fairly new on the site, they had been a little loose with that in previous years, and he made sure that everybody understood that that is the only place they can do washout.
Yep. And a good way to communicate that is to tell them that's a wastewater. That would be considered a wastewater under NIPD's.
Okay. Yep.
And that there's other activities going on the site, like the barge storage.
So that is something that we included in the O&M. There's kind of a tail end section that, if I may just scroll down to, I just called operational industrial maintenance. These are factors that aren't directly associated with stormwater discharges. However, they can affect them, and it's important to have policies in place that deal with that. First being snow storage, also spill containment, since there are dry materials on the site. The trucks are very efficient, so they don't typically spill any concrete anywhere, but they have procedures in place for that. And then, of course, there's discussion that came from the commission about the marine equipment and protocols for cleaning that equipment wherever it's pulled out of any saltwater environment, and then logging that so that there's a paper trail of where it's coming from and how it's stored on the site, to make sure that that area is inspected as well, to make sure when it comes on the site they know what's coming onto the site, and if it's not adequate, that they are able to clean that, and then but it's substantially to be cleaned where it's pulled out, and then it's to be monitored as it wherever it's placed on the site.
Are any of the barges from freshwater environments? I mean, I think the aquatic or marine environment organisms, likely would not survive long, if at all, in freshwater. I think the concern would really be more fresh, like rivers or, that type of thing, freshwater environments, freshwater, aquatic invertebrates and that type of thing.
Hopefully the procedure to clean it at the location and then log it, and so that it's trackable, will handle both environments. It is intended really to mitigate for saltwater cross contamination, I suppose, the biofouling. But perhaps what you're saying is the biofouling is a concern coming from freshwater environments. We can adjust that title to address freshwater as well, but it would be a similar procedure where it's cleaned at the pull-out location and then logged as it comes into the site. And then further, that area is subject to further inspections as time goes on to make sure, something didn't get missed.
We haven't actually asked that question. All our discussions with the client have all talked about a marine environment, salt water. So that's a question we'll have to ask.
Yeah. And we get a freshwater concern would also be, plants as well. Invasive. Yep. There's plenty of, freshwater invasive plants that can propagate through, minuscule seeds that, you're not going to notice if, even if you're looking.
Sure.
Where will that data remain, on site or in the office externally?
The intent is for it to remain on site.
Okay.
I know they have offices across the street, so it might reside in both places. We can specify that it needs to remain on this property where those pieces of equipment are located.
And is there a designated parking or location for any of those barges, like out of a resource area, perhaps?
That has not been designated. And if that's something that's a necessity, then we can look at designating that.
Do the commissioners have any questions with that?
So it looked to me like the barges were just moved out of the resource area, at least down in that one corner where they were. Is the intent to use that area or move them back?
I'm not sure if I just may jump back. Thank you for your time. I appreciate your patience with me zipping back and forth here. We've looked at a lot of historical aerials, and there's always been equipment and things lined over here. And they've, again, on the site, have taken the action to keep a space between the edge of pavement so that they can perform their sweeping and so on to help maintain the site. I think that any time that the barges are on the property, the majority, it's a limited time frame. And I think that they do utilize the whole property as much as they can to move it around. These are, large items. So
I think we need an answer to that freshwater question. If there is a risk of contamination from the barge storage, they need to be very far away. Conversely, there's issues with, or concerns rather, regarding rust and the metals that will be contributed to the watershed, through rust. I assume you will be needing to do like the baseline analytical sampling, and so some of this stuff might show up. And so these are, from a practice standpoint, I would encourage you to look at areas farther away from the resource area for storage of large metal rusting or potentially rusting objects. And then also that concern with the freshwater biofouling and introduction of invasive plant species.
We can certainly suggest to our client that that they were able to move them out of that area this time. So there's no reason to believe they wouldn't be able to do so in the future and try and keep them out of that area. So we can put that in our operations plan, and unless they run into some unusual circumstances, they should be able to keep them out of that area. And as Kyle said, they're not on the site all that often. They told us it was kind of unusual for them to have that many on site as they did when you were there.
So
They're
those,
all gone
I had
now.
noticed that. So I drive by there very, very frequently, almost on a daily basis. And I had noticed, the barge collection increasing over the past probably couple of years. I don't have an exact timeline on it, but I'm not sure. My impression was that it was, a one-time incidental thing. I had noticed that they were accumulating over multiple years.
Okay.
We're about finished here. We've got to move on
Yep.
to.
So Kyle, do you have some amendments you want to make to the O&M, or do you want us to look at the one that you're going to send to us?
Based on the comments of the commission, I'll go ahead and make some adjustments to the O&M and then get that off to Amy tomorrow so that she can distribute it to the commission. We can have hopefully a closing discussion on the 11th.
I'll see you on the 11th. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Nate?
We
sorry,
move on to the
sure.
Cloverdale Conservation Land Management Program plan. Somebody gonna speak to that?
Yeah, that was me. So this has been sort of an ongoing issue where some of the abutters have complained about what's been happening at Cloverdale. And I think maybe it's gotten to the point where it needs to get just put in writing, which gets difficult because the more you put in writing, the more you find yourself trying to cover every little possibility. But I had sent you, and I'm not sure how far you want to get into it tonight, what I had started to sketch out, including a map. I broken it into, I think 9.
I think that outline was great. So I think the map was helpful with the resources noted as well. So I think it's a live document. So I don't feel as though it has to be delved into all the minutia, but I feel as though it is a good live document.
I don't think I have it on here anymore now. One more thing here. Yeah, so, and there's certainly, I've been through this with Jim, and he went through a lot of things that Cloverdale could probably use, which aren't in here, like, putting in a bench or some of the more routine stuff. I was trying to keep it fairly generic and yet trying to cover everything at the same time. And I also wasn't sure, these areas with the green dots down here are sort of part of Cloverdale, but they are town owned. They are not really controlled by the Conservation Commission. This area up here, Area 9, includes a big detention basin that the town's supposed to be maintaining and probably doesn't. So I don't know if you want to talk to the Board of Selectmen or the Select Board about how they may or may not want to use those lands, and these two down here, most of which are wet. There was a trail created out to Surrey Road, which the Select Board had initially said was probably a good idea to get the neighborhood in there. So there is a trail through this piece of it in there. The only other thing I just wanted to comment on is the surveyors, and this up here in the top left is messed up, and it's not, I have to redo the whole thing to fix it, so I didn't bother fixing it. So the surveyors had done these areas in here and had not done this stripe here. So I asked, that was the second round of survey. And that property line is a lot further northwest than we thought it was. And it appears, I'm assuming it's from the abutter, there's a lot of stuff in those woods, including paint cans and chairs, and they have some snow fencing up, which I assume they put where they thought the property line is, and it is not. And they have a lot of little fire pit back in here somewhere, which does look like it is on their property. And a huge cross culvert. I think Jim, you'd mentioned this one before, that comes through out in there as well. So there's some discussions we had about that, those intrusions as well.
I have a little bit of a question. Can you drop it down a little bit, Amy? From the top? No, the other way. I can remember walking in from, is it Grist Mill? In through there, there's some kind of an easement there with a big drainage pipe and stuff that I don't know whether that's private property or town property that's in there. Years ago, we got called in because stuff was backing up and flooding some of these houses.
Jim, that was like directly across from one of DeCarlo's parcels, and that I was with you when we did that.
Yeah, lot 23 is owned by Jim DeCarlo, and the beaver dam is right at the edge of it.
Yep.
Where the beaver deceiver was is no longer active right now. So there is a possibility that we could cut through Jim's land there. I think he has verbally given us permission in the past, but there's a hammerhead lot that comes off of Drover. I think it's number 3292, which is private, and it's wet. We would have to cross inland from the red line there.
Mm-hmm.
And also one more thing, Amy, that lot 3293 at the end of the retention basin on Surrey Drive, that's also a town-owned lot.
Oops, okay.
So that should be extended up to that,
good.
That other lot. So it actually surrounds that hammerhead lot there.
So I don't think the management plan will get too much more complicated than it is. I just want to make sure I sort of mentioned everything that might happen, like, beaver control and burning of piles and invasive species control. It's going to be somewhat generic, I think, because like you said, it's a living document. I'm hoping also to have another map which would include the man-made features on there, where the various crossings are, where the foundation is that Jim had found and cleared out, and where the cow tunnel is, which is actually on town property, I think, not conservation property. It's in here somewhere. But at least get that stuff all mapped out.
Good.
Thanks for doing that, Amy. It was a lot of time you put into this.
Yeah, this is the fun part, though. So, because we
line
need
is
to.
going to change here.
I'm sorry, Jim.
The line that's along 32-110 is going to change.
Up here.
3293.
Yeah, so this lot will get included. It kind of stuck actually, so sometimes the line doesn't follow where my cursor is. So I got to fix all this up.
Okay.
Other stuff. But I think probably the biggest question is going to be, because Jim has kind of stopped or cut back on the mowing of this area 3 in here, which is invasive species and was the stockpile area when the boardwalk was being built. So I think getting some documentation so that the abutters have something to look at and know what the intent is for the mowing in here, as well as the mowing mostly of the rest of this, obviously the trails, but mostly areas 1, 2, and 3.
Well, yeah, especially 1 and 2 are invasive control.
Yeah, especially along the edges. And I numbered them that way because area 1 and 2 is what was identified back when the tree clearing happened. So I just kept them as area 1 and 2 and then went from there.
Okay. And but the paint and stuff, we should have that removed or ask
Whose
whoever.
property is that on? The town or?
No, that's Adema's property over here,
Is that in the buffer?
their
That's
property.
in the buffer, isn't it?
Some of it is, yeah.
Okay.
Not much, some of it.
That's a question. How did the property fare after the thaw and all the rain that we received? Everything going okay?
Well, the end of the main boardwalk is quite wet. And we've talked about a possibility of extending the boardwalk. It would have to be another 200 feet or so, which would probably mean another grant. It's passable. It's not standing water. It's just muddy every time it rains. So people kind of walk at the edges and try to avoid it, but it's pretty muddy. And then down near the cattle walk tunnel, it's wetter again down there. That would be on, yeah, where Amy's got the cursor there. Over towards Great Road a little more. Yeah. But that's wet there, but I can mitigate that in the spring if you allow me to just regrade it. I could just probably rototill it and just rake it at a different angle so that the water will drain off. Because right now there's kind of just puddles there from where the ruts were made by the forestry crew when they cut the invasives along Great Road there. So that can be mitigated fairly easily. But at the other end of the boardwalk is a main concern.
Where were the telephone poles proposed? Some sort of a bridge or something there? Where was that going to happen?
Well, the telephone poles are up near where it says Area 2, with the circle for Area 2. I don't have a key for this, so I'll just have to rely on Amy to point. Those were dropped there from by Savis years ago. And we used 2 of them to cross the inlet stream and made a little bridge there. But there's 2 still remaining right up along the guardrail, right in that area too. Kind of near where the old foundation is. There was an old farm stand or a tractor stand or a tractor shed or something there from the farm. So those remain right along the guardrail at present.
You would, I thought we talked about you using them, or at one point I was wondering where you were gonna do where you needed to use them.
Well, we changed the plan, and it wouldn't cost that much to use the plastic pipe like we used on the main boardwalk instead of the utility poles. Mm-hmm. And then we will eliminate any chemicals being leached into the soil or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So that's what the plan is now. I believe Amy heard from Griffin, and he's got an extension in the spring. So obviously he's not going to start building now with the snow coming in. So we won't be using the utility poles for the construction of the new boardwalk.
Okay. So is there any more further discussion here, or should we move along?
Yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll keep messing around with this, get a little further, come up with probably a more directed mowing program per se, and then we can call it quits for a year and maybe revisit every year or 2, or when changes are needed.
I would just like to add one thing. Along the edge of Area 2, I've been mowing the glossy buckthorn right down to the water's edge to maintain that rather than using any chemicals. And it's working fine. So I would like to have approval to continue doing that. In fact, if the weather stays open, I just got my mower back from Great Road Farm and Garden. So I could mow that now rather than wait until it leafs out. It's just glossy buckthorn that hasn't been mowed in 2 years now. I was mowing it every year, but I didn't get to it last year because we were building the boardwalk.
And it's probably, ground is probably frozen, so it keeps you from sinking in too.
Right. Yeah, but it's just that I basically just go back and forth facing the wetland and just mow that stuff down. And, you know, it's going to grow back, but at least it's a way to control the invasives rather than treating it with chemicals.
I would support if you can do it safely this winter, that would be great.
Okay. Yeah, in fact, the year we had the big snow, 2015, I was mowing it in the middle of January before the snows started. The ground was frozen, and so I was able to mow right out onto the ice almost. So it pretty much eliminates all of that low shrubby growth.
Okay.
Okay.
Do we need to have a vote on that, Amy, or just
I don't think so. This was just a,
maintenance?
it's your initial input and see where we're going with it.
Yeah, I would just like to add that I would like some kind of a plan so that I know when I'm allowed to mow and when I'm not allowed to mow, especially in Lot 5A, where I'm being scrutinized a lot. So it was in a meeting in 2018 that I was asked to stop mowing that area, which I did. I continued mowing the 25-foot buffer to keep the invasives from encroaching onto my yard. But I haven't mowed the rest of it, and now the bittersweet and poison ivy and everything is really taken over. In fact, when we did the site walk, it was pretty evident to the members that were out there, to the commissioners. And that's just continuing to take over the trees there. So I would like that to be in the plan so that I could at least mow that once a year.
Yeah. And it also looks like we control a lot more of this, which has a lot of invasives in it. Also.
Yeah, and that has a lot of deadfall too, which
Yeah.
I can get the trail crew or the stewards to clean that up. So it'll make future mowing a lot easier because I won't have to dodge around dead branches and trees.
It almost seems like it needs to be mowed more than once a year if you're trying to stay.
Well, I agree with that, but you know, I'll go along with whatever you guys decide. I mean,
Yeah,
I'd just like to keep.
We'll have to think about this area. It's pretty wooded and shrubby, and I would hate to keep mowing it and clean out the deadfall, which has a purpose. But we can walk it and take a look at it, Jim, sometime. And figure out.
Okay, and one other thing we were going to do, Amy, was mark the trees with the
Yes.
boundary markers. I've done along my property line out to the street and along the street down to the parking area. But I would prefer to do the rest of that when you are with me.
Yes. Yeah, I was quite surprised by where this was.
Yeah, I think it's like 40 feet from that corner. The assessor's map shows that it comes right where you have your cursor, but it's
more like over here.
30 to 40 feet north of that.
So it sounds as though it would be good for some of the commissioners to go out and see that new line as well.
I think that would be a good idea, yeah.
Okay. All right, we appreciate your time and good luck mowing.
All right, thank you. Happy New Year.
Amy, I'm gonna scoot, so if you could make note that I signed off.
Oh, thank you. Yep.
Okay.
I gotta speak to you guys.
Happy New Year.
Happy New
Happy
Year.
New Year.
We still got a quorum with you to leave?
Yep.
Public hearing, notice of intent, 83 Mill Road. U 38260, Mass D 305 number 204-9XX, replacement of a failed septic system. Who wants to speak to that one?
Well, that would be Ted Doucette, but I don't see him, and he's not sitting out anywhere.
Good night, everybody.
Right.
Hey, Andrew.
So can we do the 9 o'clock one? I don't have a clock in front of me.
Yes.
Okay. Continued public hearing, notice of intent, 9 Scott Road, U 49270, Mass DEP file number 204-9XX, paving driveway, And I guess there's another one for 11 Scott Road, U 49280, Mass DEP file number 204-9XX. That was kind of a discussion item, wasn't it? Setting up as a review with the board members.
Yeah, that was on there because y'all wanted to do a site walk, and of course, the snow melted over the weekend before we had a chance to do the site walk. So I think at this point, do you want to try to arrange one? Maybe, I can't remember what the weather's gonna be like. Tuesday, Thursday, or even Friday.
Maybe now, reasonable. Anyway.
Rain.
Yeah.
Supposed to rain on Friday.
Well, as long as it's not snow.
And Sarah had said she can't do Wednesday.
Hmm.
Was anyone available tomorrow? I mean, I can also do Thursday, that is New Year's Eve, if anybody cares.
Yeah. I could go tomorrow. I could also go Thursday. Not a whole heck of a lot going on this week, which is nice. I actually did do a drive-by just in case enough people had been able to do a drive-by, but it was threading the needle for sure with, trying to get eyes on. So.
Yeah. All right, I'll send around an email also to Andrew and Sarah and see if maybe they can do either Tuesday or Thursday. Kyle, Brian, can you, either one of those better or worse for you?
I'm tied up Tuesday and Thursday, but I could do Wednesday.
Yes.
I could also do Wednesday. I mean, whatever you, and I'm kind of flexible with whatever you end up with.
All right, well, it'd probably be easy to do two. I mean, it's easy to get to. So maybe we just do two, or Brian, you can go out on your own, or I'll send around an email.
Okay.
But it sounds, Brenda, like someone's gonna be there almost all the time anyway.
Okay. So is that the continuation of our meeting, or did you have some administrative stuff you wanted to throw in?
Nope, that was it.
That's it. Somebody want to get brave enough to do an adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Here a second?
Second.
And you guess you got to do a roll call.
All right, roll call. Kyle Maxfield.
Kyle Maxfield, aye.
Brian Crowley, aye. Jim Pickard.
Jim Pickett, aye.
And Julie Rupp.
Julie Rupp, aye.
I guess that's carries. We're all done.
Thank you very much.
All right. Happy New Year, everyone.
I'll let you guys know when we're coming.
Guys, before.
Happy New Year.